Hello, in this video I'm going to demonstrate a larger example in DIVEX, and this example is written in Composition Language 1, which is a language based on C#. So if you understand C#, you should understand most of the code here. So here I have a method called processDocument. It takes a document to process, and then it takes three function parameters. The first function parameter is called needs translation, and basically you give this function a document and it tells you whether you need to translate this document, right? This translate function is used to translate a document in case it needs translation, and this save document function is used to finally save the document, right? So here I'm logging to the console that I'm processing the document. I'm checking if I need to translate. If so, I do translate the document, and then I save the document, right? Since these are function parameters, we can pass any functions that match the signatures, right? Okay. And here I have two functions that can detect the need for translation. One does so using a third-party library, and one using a web service. Now this function, the one that uses a third-party library, it takes the document, right? And it has a string parameter called model file, and basically this would be a file that would allow the third-party library to do the detection, right? But here I'm just simulating this, and I'm simply writing to the console the fact that we are detecting using a third-party library. Okay, and I always return true. Okay, now the second function that can detect the need for translation, in addition to the document parameter, it takes a web service URL, it takes an authentication token, and another integer parameter called detection level, right? So if we need to use this function, we have these three dependencies to satisfy, right? And here again, I'm just simulating this by writing to the console the fact that we are using a web service to detect the need for translation, right? Here I'm outputting the URL and the detection level. Okay, now for the translate parameter of processDocument, I have two functions that can satisfy this parameter. One uses a third-party library and one uses a web service. Okay, so the one that uses the third-party library again requires a model file, and again I'm just writing this to the console. And the one that uses the web service requires a web service URL and an authentication token. Okay, now for the save document parameter, I have one function that can satisfy this dependency, and it's the save document function, right? This function takes a document parameter, but then it takes four more function parameters. One is called classify, and this function can be used to basically classify the document. Is it a financial document? Is it a technical document? Is it an administrative document, right? And these three functions are called to save the document depending on the type of the document. So here first I'm calling the classify function to classify the document. If the type is technical, I'm calling the save technical document function, right? If the type is financial or administrative, I'm calling the save business document function, right? This one here. Otherwise, I'm calling the save other document function. Okay, now here I have two functions that can save documents. And by the way, these two functions can also be used to satisfy the save document parameter of the processDocument function. But currently I'm not using them directly, but I could do so. So this save document to database function, it takes the document to save and a table name, and it's supposed to save the document in the database in a specific table name, right? And this save document to file system, it takes the document and a folder path parameter, and it's supposed to save the document to the file system based on this path, right? Okay, so let me show you now how I am composing all those functions using Composition Language 1. So here I'm fixing the translate parameter for process document to use translation by web service, and I'm fixing the save document parameter of process document to use the save document function, right? And to remind you, this save document function, it has a classify parameter, right? And then 3 save parameters to save documents based on their types, right? Okay. So after fixing save document, I'm also fixing the value for save technical document to use save document to database. So basically here I'm deciding that for technical documents, I want to use the database, right? But I'm not specifying a table name here, right? Instead, I'm renaming the table name parameter of save document to database to be technical documents table name, right? So here, if I hover over the open bracket here, it says function returned by set, and then it says document, and then technical documents table name. And this is basically the function returned by this injection, right? Okay, here for business documents, I'm also using the database, right? But here I'm fixing the name of the table to use, right? So here I'm using a table called business documents, right? For other documents, I'm using the file system and I'm fixing the value of folder path, right? So here I could have done this in many different ways. I could have chosen to fix other things and keep other things unfixed, right? So one thing I forgot to mention here is that when we specified a value for translate, which is translate using web service, we fixed the value for the web service URL and we renamed the authentication token parameter to auth token for translate, right? And this is useful because if we look at the signature of process document, here when we see this parameter, because it's named auth token for translate, we know that this authentication token will be used when talking to the translation web service, right? And not, for example, for the web service that detects the need for translation. So at this level, having this parameter named like this is useful, right? Okay, now looking at the signature, we know that we haven't fixed how we detect the need for translation. We haven't fixed the authentication token to use when communicating with the web service. We haven't fixed or decided on how to classify documents, and we haven't fixed the name of the table to store technical documents into, right? Okay. So this is a clear example and a larger example of how we can compose many functions and fix certain things like here, right? But leave other things unfixed. So here, I'm doing more injection over this process document function and specifying a value for need translation, and here I'm using this function which detects the need for translation using a third-party library, right? And here I'm also fixing the model file that is required by this function, right? So if I look at the signature of this function, so the needs translation parameter is gone because we fixed it, and we are left with just these parameters. Okay, so process document 2 here, it further works on process document 1 and it fixes the classify parameter to do classification by web service, right? It fixes the web service URL. It doesn't fix the value for authentication token, but it renames it, right? It renames it to auth token for classify, right? And this is very useful because if we look at the signature of this function, now we have two parameters of type authentication token, but we know that this one is for translate and this one is for classify, right? And because we named the parameters in the two cases, now it's very clear which is which, right? So process document 3 doesn't build on process document 2, but like process document 2, it builds on process document, right? But it chooses a different way to classify documents, right? So process document 2 classifies document using the web service, but process document 3 classifies document by using the third-party library, right? So if I look at the signature here, it just takes the document, the authentication token for translate, and then the name of the table for technical documents. Now process document 4 is based on process document directly, process document the variable, right? But unlike process document 1, it doesn't use the third-party library to detect the need for translation. Instead, it uses the web service to do so, right? And here it fixes the value for the URL, but it keeps the authentication token parameter unfixed, but it renames it to make things clearer, right? Okay, so if I look at the signature of this function, it takes a document, an authentication token for detection, right? To detect the need for translation. It takes detection level. This is a parameter of the function that does the detection using the web service. This parameter is the authentication token for the translate functionality. Here we still didn't fix the classify function, right? And here is the parameter for the table name of technical documents, right? So one interesting thing here I can do, if I'm not sure exactly what is a destination of a parameter, I can click on it and then track destination, right? Now this doesn't work in full screen mode, but I can exit that mode. I can go here and expand all, and here I can track the destination, and I can see here that this ultimately goes to detect need for translation using web service, and I can click on this and it sends me here. Okay, let me go back to full screen mode. Okay, so process document 5, it builds on process document 4, but it fixes the classify parameter to use classification by web service. Again, it decides on the URL here, but it keeps the authentication token undecided, but it does rename it, right? So here, if I look at the signature, it requires all these parameters. Okay, and here we have 3 authentication token parameters, but they are named differently, which allows us to understand what they are for. Okay, so here I'm invoking all those functions. Each function has certain things fixed and certain things unfixed. And when we invoke the function, we have to specify values for all the things that are unfixed, right? So here I'm invoking process document 2, here process document 3, and here process document 5. Some of these functions have more parameters than other functions based on what we fixed earlier, right? Okay, and I can run this example by hitting Ctrl, Shift, and X. So we can see here processing document 3. So for processing document 3, the detection of the need for translation was done using the third-party library, translating was done using a web service, classification was done using a web service, and saving the document was done to the database using this table name, right? So in this video I have demonstrated a larger example, and I hope now that you can see how DIVEX can be used to fix certain things and leave other things unfixed, right? And when you leave things unfixed, this allows you to fix them in different ways at a later point in time, right? Like in this example, when we created the process document function, the variable I mean, this one here, we fixed many things, right? But we kept many things unfixed. This allowed us to fix the remaining items multiple times, each time in a different way, right? Okay, so if you would like to learn more about DIVEX and Composition Language 1, please subscribe to this channel, and if you like the video, please hit the like button. Okay, thank you for watching.